Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement, where your certified retirement counselor Mark Struthers takes a holistic approach to retirement, going beyond finances and embracing holistic well-being. This YouTube channel will address not just the financial part of retirement, but also the social, the physical, and the emotional parts of retirement. Everything you need for a healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement. Here is your host, Mark Struthers.
Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement. My name is Mark Struthers. I am your host. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Would you like to be a 1%er? Or see if you're on track to join the 1% club in retirement savings? And some of the numbers might surprise you. There certainly are big numbers, but I think some people are surprised that maybe they're not bigger. Most Americans do struggle to save for retirement. The top 1%, as you might guess, certainly amass a nice nest egg. Although, oddly enough, I work with a lot of clients that fall into these categories here in Minnesota, or actually across the country, but especially in Minnesota, who don't really feel like they're they're 1%ers. So we often don't appreciate how much we have. When you think about retirees, before we get to the numbers, one stat, and I believe all this came from the Federal Reserve, that this is Federal Reserve data. So a small fraction of retirees actually have saved that ever elusive $1 million. $1 million used to be a lot of money. It still is. It is still a fantastic number to get to if you can. And the percentage that have actually saved that in the U.S., this actually did surprise me, is around 9%. It's somewhere between 8 and 10%. So when I heard that number, there are two things that occurred to me. One is that did not factor in the value of someone's home. That's a conversation that we're going to have more and more. When I just listened to a podcast from the Institute of Wealth Management, and they talked about it's a concern for folks because as we age and if our income streams are kind of fixed, that if the value of our home is increasing, the cost of that home is increasing. And I'm not going to go too far in a tangent, even though I'm known for that, but it's a concern because while the value of your home might be going up, it often isn't going up enough to compared to other assets. You know, if you need to grow assets at 6% for long-term care or other goals, whatever they may be, and your home is only going up at 3 to 4, and that doesn't include the cost, and it's the cost of the home. You know, you can figure 1% for property taxes, 0.5% for insurance, and so on and so on. That's a separate podcast. But that when I heard about only 9% of folks having $1 million, I think if you factor in home equity, that would be different. You know, the question is, you know, how do you, from a financial planning standpoint, how do you factor that in, especially if you don't have access to it, if someone doesn't want to move? Another stat that I found interesting, in 2023, the average American retiree had about 170,000, which is not a lot, especially if you count long-term care costs. A decrease from 191,000 in 2022. That surprised me. Take into account general recommended savings amounts for the typical retiree. It's recommended that the typical person have just over $500,000. Now, I did not get what they used for that number. I'm guessing it's something like the 10% rule. But only 12% of retirees have achieved or exceeded that recommended amount. So those are concerning, but again, they don't factor in the equity of someone's home, and it also doesn't factor any pensions. Pensions are less and less common, but for a lot of baby boomers, they still have them. They still are a big asset. The overall retirement savings for the wealthiest 1% is around $2.3 million. And if you consider a broader definition of retirement assets, that figure jumps to 5. That's a big number. Um, it is we're such a house-centric society, and because of secular changes, the cost of homes keep going up. That it is a concern when you think about, from a financial standpoint, and just a mindset around, do you use some of these less liquid assets to help with your retirement? So for the top 1% by age group, we're only going to cover three age groups. So 50 to 54 is at 2.3 million for the top 1%. 55 to 59, a little over 3.1 million, and 60 to 64, 3.5. And then it does, after the age of 70, then they start to drop off. So it keeps getting larger with age. And keep in mind, this is the top 1%. Now, these figures, if you're in New York and you're a 65-year-old, $3 million, I'm sure is a lot of money, but it's not the same as having $3 million if you're in Minnesota, if you're in rural Minnesota, rural Mississippi. And part of a big chunk of that is housing as well. We watch these home and garden network shows, and then when they're buying a home, someplace really expensive, $1 million won't buy you much of a home in Manhattan, but $1 million will buy you a lot of home in rural Mississippi. The reason I chose these three age groups is because this is really where people start to think about retirement and retirement transition. There are certainly folks who work to 70, but what I have found matches this other data point from the Federal Reserve is that the average retirement age for in the U.S. is 60, which is young, but I'm not totally surprised, and with a median age of 62. And 62 I find to be a popular number. Unless someone is kind of forced out, unless they're entirely burnt out, often there could be an illness that pops up. There could be a family member for them or a family member, or there's a bunch of layoffs at the company that they're working at. And rather than looking for a job at 58, 59 years old, they just decide to retire. So I'm hoping the attitudes around that changes a little. As many of you know, I'm a big fan of working comfortably in retirement, which takes some planning. Whether it's consulting, whatever the case may be, just because people often will say, I'm willing to work to 70 or 67. Well, something happens and they can't. It's unusual to see too many people retire in their early to mid 50s. Again, once you start getting late 50s to early 60s, you certainly see it. This is where planning can be valuable. Planning is not perfect. We're guessing at the future. But if you can put some thought into what retirement looks like and what you might need, or something that you could do to work comfortably in retirement, the more planning you do, the more it's going to be your choice, and the more you're going to have that healthier, wealthier retirement. Normally I would close on that, but I'm not going to here. So when you think about the 1%, keep around this. These are the top savers. These are usually the top earners that they have this retirement. This is not meant to make you jealous or fearful, but it's meant to encourage you to say, what do I need? I'm 50 years old. I don't have $2 million saved, but what do I have? What do I need? It could be your home is maybe unusually high. Your home equity is unusually high for your age. Could that be part of your financial plan? Or what do you need to get to where you want to be? And for some people, honestly, even though these are the top 1%, because of their spending or where they live, it's not a lot of money. That I certainly have had 50-year-olds that have $2 million saved, and we'll say another half to three-quarters of a million and maybe in home equity, who, given what they want to spend and what they want to do in retirement, it's not enough. If someone is spending 20, 30 grand a month in retirement, you're probably going to need more than that $2 million. So it all depends. That's more than anything else. The important thing is that you gather information, and that's why you're tuned into this YouTube channel, and that you try to make an informed, thoughtful decision. And if you do that, you're going to have a healthier a wealthier and a happier retirement. Stay well, everyone.